He screamed at me daily. Threw keyboards. Worked me like a machine, 13-hour shifts, no overtime, while smirking like he owned me. I had a master's degree. But in that office, I was treated like disposable dirt. They told me it was just the industry, that construction was tough and I needed thicker skin. So I swallowed my pride. For 2 years. And every year, like clockwork, he'd demand free concert tickets for him and his wife, because I owed him. But when I finally quit, I gave him one last parting gift. A free concert ticket in another city, with a fake QR code. He flew across the country, only to get turned away at the door. Now that's what I call poetic justice. If you've ever been pushed to your limit, if you've ever felt small in the face of power, this story is your revenge fantasy brought to life. And if you've ever worked for someone who thought screaming and humiliation were leadership tools, then you'll understand exactly why this ending hits so hard. So before we jump in, hit that subscribe button and like this video. Drop a comment if you've ever wanted to serve up some quiet, satisfying karma. Because what you're about to hear isn't just payback, it's surgical, silent, and absolutely delicious. Now, let's dive in. Fresh out of grad school, I was ready to take on the world. I had just completed my master's degree, a rigorous 2-year slog through sleepless nights, research deadlines, and countless caffeine-fueled marathons. I didn't come from a privileged background. Every step of that journey was earned. So when I landed a full-time job at a well-known construction firm, I was over the moon. That IT was supposed to be the kind of role that would get my foot in the door. Learn the ropes, put in a year or two, then climb the ladder. That's what they sold me, but from day one, something felt off. My first day was a blur of chaos. Phones ringing non-stop. Managers barking orders. The receptionist had a permanent frown etched into her face. Nobody said, "Welcome aboard." No one even smiled. It was as if I had stepped into a pressure cooker with no escape valve. Then, I met him. Let's call him Frank. My boss, Frank, was the kind of man who wore his rage like a cologne, pungent, choking, and impossible to ignore. Loud, cocky, always chewing gum like he was trying to crush someone's skull between his teeth. He had a swagger that wasn't confidence, it was dominance. He loved control, and his favorite tool of control was fear. He didn't believe in training. On my second day, he slammed a stack of blueprints on my desk and grunted, "Figure it out. You've got a degree, right?" And just like that, the tone was set. I worked 12, sometimes 13 hours a day. Not because I wanted to, but because Frank made it impossible not to. If I left even 10 minutes early, I'd get a sarcastic half-day hug from across the office. If I showed signs of fatigue, he'd say, "Tired?" I didn't know we hired toddlers. There was no overtime. No compensation. No appreciation, just pressure and screaming. The screaming. And Frank didn't just yell. He weaponized it. Like a drill sergeant trying to break you down. He'd throw tantrums in front of clients, pound his fists on desks, and shout at full volume. For the smallest mistakes, even when they weren't mine. Once, during a late Friday shift, he hurled a wireless mouse across the room. It slammed into the wall, shattering into pieces just inches from where I sat. Another time, he ripped the keyboard from his desk and threw it, yes, literally threw it, because a file wasn't printed on the correct size paper. I wasn't the only one who suffered. Everyone was scared of him. People avoided eye contact, whispered in hallways, and treated every interaction like it might be their last. HR? Non-existent. And upper management, they just shrugged. "This is construction," they said. "You need thick skin to survive." But what nobody saw were the nights I'd sit in my car after work, hands gripping the wheel, crying in silence. Not sobbing, just slow, exhausted tears that wouldn't stop falling. My body ached. My mind was frayed. My spirit? Nearly gone. I started questioning myself. Was I weak? Was this what paying your dues meant? Was I just being dramatic? But Deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't professional growth, this was abuse, and still, I stayed, because when you've invested years into your education, and you're told over and over again that quitting means failure, you start to believe it. You convince yourself that maybe enduring hell is just part of the journey, until one day, you realize hell isn't worth the climb. I wish I could say it got better. That things smoothed out. That the storm passed, but it didn't. If anything, the storm became my normal and Frank got meaner, bolder, and I got quieter, more withdrawn. I started shrinking into myself, physically and mentally. I stopped speaking up in meetings. I stopped making eye contact. My heart raced every time his footsteps came down the hall. That's how bad it was. My body reacted to his presence like it was under threat. He had this twisted sense of mentorship. He'd say things like, "You think you're overworked? This is me going easy on you." Or, "You're not being abused. You're being toughened. One day, you'll thank me." As if he were doing me a favor by emotionally breaking me down, and I'll never forget the day he screamed at me so loudly, the glass panel next to my cubicle vibrated. All because I forgot to include a CC in an email. He stood over me, his face red, vein bulging out of his neck, spittle flying as he yelled, "You are an embarrassment. I could train a damn intern to do your job better." The office went silent. No one looked up. No one came to check if I was okay. IT was like I didn't exist, except as a punching bag for Frank's ego, and yet I kept showing up. Every day, I dragged myself to work, stomach tight, hands trembling on the steering wheel. Some days, I'd sit in my car for 15 minutes, just trying to find the strength to open the door. My partner started to notice the toll it was taking on me. They'd watch me come home looking like a ghost, shoulders slumped, eyes vacant, head full of noise I couldn't explain, but they never gave up on me. They were my only escape. My only breath of normal. My partner worked with several nonprofits and charities and volunteered constantly at shelters, cultural festivals, community projects. And because of that, they often got free tickets to art galleries, concerts, and live events. And music was the one thing that made me feel human again. I remember one night, after a particularly horrific work week, my partner surprised me with tickets to a string quartet performance in the park. I remember sitting there, wrapped in a blanket, sipping warm cider, and for the first time in months, I felt peace. Then Monday came, and I was back in the pit. Frank found out about the tickets. I had made the mistake of mentioning it in passing. The next week, he cornered me near the printer, hands on hips, and said, "Hey, your partner volunteers with those artsy places, right? Get me 2 VIP tickets to the symphony show next weekend. My wife's been nagging me about it." It wasn't a request, it was an order, and so, I got them. Because I was scared of what he'd do if I said no. That became the pattern. Twice a year, every year, he'd demand tickets. He never asked nicely. Never once said thank you. Just barked the order and expected me to deliver. I didn't want my partner to know I was being forced into this, so I'd always sugarcoat it when asking them. "My boss is a fan of classical music," I'd say. It'd really mean a lot. And every time I handed Frank those tickets, he'd grin smugly and say, "See? You're finally becoming useful." Useful, that word made my skin crawl, and while he enjoyed his evenings out on my effort, using my partner's goodwill, I'd be back in the office, filing reports, responding to emails he didn't want to deal with. Them. Why breaking point didn't come in a dramatic moment. It came quietly. One Tuesday evening, I was in the office late, again. Everyone had left. I was cleaning up after another one of Frank's desk tirades. Coffee spilled. Papers crumpled. He had thrown an entire stapler across the room that morning, and something inside me just stopped. I looked at the mess. The flickering ceiling light. My reflection in the window, tired, pale, lifeless, and I whispered to myself, "This isn't who I am." I didn't belong in this world of screams and shattered mice. I didn't need thick skin to be successful. I needed self-respect. That night, I opened my laptop and typed up my resignation. I gave 2 weeks' notice. Frank didn't even flinch when I told him. He chuckled, "You'll be back. They all come back." You think the world out there is easier? You'll miss me. And then, almost as an afterthought, he added, by the way, get me 2 tickets to that classical show next month, my wife's been looking forward to it. He smiled, and for the first time, I smiled back, but my smile was for me, because in that moment, I knew what I was going to do. The next few days were surreal. You'd think giving 2 weeks' notice would bring relief, like letting go of a heavy suitcase you've been dragging across broken glass. But in reality, the anxiety didn't just disappear, it twisted itself into something else. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was calculating, because for the first time in 2 years, I was the one with control. Frank didn't suspect a thing. He continued treating me like I was still his personal assistant/verbal punching bag. He made snide remarks during meetings. He'd laugh with the site supervisors about how millennials quit too easily. He'd wave me off like I was a child and say, "You'll never survive without someone telling you what to do." And every time he said that, I just nodded politely. Smiled, even, because his final demand, the concert tickets, had planted the seed for a plan I didn't even know I needed. See, my partner still volunteered at that same non-profit venue. They had early access to ticket releases, and sometimes got complimentary seats. It wasn't unusual for me to secure a pair for someone who asked, so long as they gave me some notice. Frank gave plenty of notice. He wanted tickets to a classical performance, a rare European quartet doing a single North American appearance in a neighboring city. Apparently, his wife had been raving about them. He said they were flying out for the weekend, staying in a nice hotel, having a little getaway, so, he said, dropping his usual arrogance, "You better not screw this up." He had no idea that I went to my partner and asked if they could secure 2 seats for the show. They managed to get tickets, but only for the out-of-town venue, not our local one. When I told Frank he'd need to fly, he barely blinked. He was too obsessed with impressing his wife. "Just get the tickets. Don't care where it is," he muttered, and so, I got them. Or at least, he thought I did. What I really did was edit them. Nothing drastic. Nothing obvious. Just enough to invalidate them. I used a free PDF tool to open the digital file. Changed a single digit on the QR code string. Adjusted the internal ticket number by 1 character. It was surgical, subtle. Enough that unless you scanned the code, it would look completely authentic. Then, I made one final tweak. I made sure the ticket name displayed was my partner's, just like every other time. That way, if they tried to look it up, Frank wouldn't be able to confirm any credentials. Why? Because after 2 years of using me, screaming at me, and belittling everything I did, he never once bothered to learn my partner's full name. Not once said he didn't know who they were. Didn't care, and that ignorance was about to cost him. There's something intoxicating about quiet revenge, but it's not rage. It's not screaming back. It's colder, sharper, controlled, and that's exactly how I felt the moment I hit send on that email with the doctored tickets. "Hi Frank, attached are the tickets for the upcoming performance. These are for the venue in other city, as discussed. Enjoy the show. Best, my name." No emojis. No smiley faces. No passive-aggressive digs, just professional. Crisp. Clinical. He replied a few hours later with a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. No thanks, no comment, just a lazy little icon as if to say, "Good. You did what you were supposed to." And that was the final thread of the old me snapping. I wasn't supposed to do anything for him anymore, but the damage was done. I had nothing to lose. My last day at work was already marked. I had cleaned out my desk, deleted my work files, wiped the personal folder on my laptop. Everything was buttoned up perfectly, and I was free, but I still had to endure one final week of smug glances and fake chuckles from Frank, who believed, deep down, that I'd come running back. He kept making little jokes to the team, loud enough for me to hear, "Don't worry, she'll be back when she realizes how tough it is out there. Maybe she'll finally get a clue when no one hires her." But I didn't respond. I didn't even flinch, because I wasn't angry anymore. I was waiting for the weekend. Waiting for his moment of reckoning. waiting for that fake ticket to make its grand appearance, and finally, the day came. Saturday morning, I woke up to my partner brewing coffee and the scent of French toast in the kitchen. It was peaceful. Quiet. A small slice of happiness I had almost forgotten how to enjoy. Meanwhile, several hundred miles away, Frank and his wife were arriving at the venue. I know this because Frank, being Frank, posted everything on Instagram. Airport selfies. First-class lounge snacks. Hotel check-in with his wife, captioned, "Much-needed weekend with my queen." Then a photo outside the concert hall. Both of them dressed to the nines. His wife in a floor-length gown. Frank in a tuxedo he probably hadn't worn in a decade, and then, radio silence and no more posts, but my phone, it wouldn't stop vibrating. When I say my phone wouldn't stop buzzing, I mean it lit up like a slot machine on fire. The first call came around 6:47 p.m. Then again at 6:51. Then 6:58. 7 calls. 12 messages. All in the span of 30 minutes. I didn't even look at the screen at first. I was curled up on the couch, plate of hot food in hand, halfway through an old episode of The Office. Ironic, really. Because unlike that show, My Office hadn't been funny in years. When I finally glanced at my phone and saw Frank work lighting up again, I almost laughed. I didn't answer. I didn't even touch it, I just let it ring. And ring. And ring. Then I muted the device, flipped it face down on the coffee table, and kept watching TV, because I already knew what had happened. I could picture it so clearly in my head. It was almost cinematic. Frank and his wife walking up to the will call entrance, smug and overconfident. He probably waved his phone in front of the usher with the swagger of a man who assumed the world owed him something, except the scanner didn't beep. Instead, a quiet error sound out. He tries again, still nothing. The usher probably frowned, checked the QR code, then typed in the ticket number manually. Nothing. Frank's confusion would have turned to frustration, then to anger, and I guarantee you, because I know this man, I know he didn't react calmly. He would have snapped. Raised his voice. Demanded to speak to a manager. Used that awful phrase, "Do you know who I am?" But they didn't know, because the name on the ticket was my partner's, someone he had never bothered to remember. And when they asked for ID, or confirmation, or any way to verify the purchase, he had nothing. No email receipt. No name match. No refund, just a QR code that refused to scan. And a growing line of elegant, cultured guests watching him unravel like a child denied a toy. I imagined his wife's face. Mortified. Embarrassed. Pulling him aside, hissing under her breath, "Just buy new tickets." But of course, the event was sold out. It had been for weeks. These were high society tickets, people flew in from all over just to attend. There were no re-entries. No special exceptions. Certainly not for men in rental tuxedos yelling at volunteers. Frank had always treated tickets like some minor favor. Something owed to him because he barked the loudest, but that night, he learned what it felt like to be denied. Dismissed. Ignored. Exactly how he had made me feel every day for 2 years, and while he stewed in frustration, burning through phone, battery, and curse words, I sat in peace. Sipped tea. And smiled, because justice doesn't always need an audience. Sometimes it's better when they suffer alone. I never heard his voice that night, just the frantic vibration of a phone determined to be noticed, and that, honestly, was perfect, because had I answered, had I let him scream, accuse, demand, I would've been pulled right back into the emotional battlefield he ruled for so long. I didn't owe him that. Not anymore. What I owed myself was peace, and I gave it to myself, one ignored call at a time. By the time I checked my phone hours later, I had 16 missed calls and several texts, each one more unhinged than the last. What the hell is this? These tickets aren't working. Did you mess up? Call me right now. If you screwed this up, I swear to God, you think this is funny? We flew out here for nothing? I read each one slowly, sipping tea, barely suppressing a smirk, but then came the real masterpiece. You know what? You're pathetic. This is why you'll never succeed. You sabotage people who actually work hard. I hope this was worth ruining your reputation. My reputation? He had spent 2 years trashing me in front of coworkers, making me cry in supply closets, throwing electronics like a toddler in a tantrum, and now I was the one with integrity issues? That text was the most satisfying part of all, because it showed he knew this wasn't an accident, that he knew, deep down, that I had finally turned the tables, and better yet, there was nothing he could do about it. He couldn't call HR. I no longer worked there. He couldn't prove sabotage, the tickets were sent digitally, same format as always. He couldn't accuse me publicly, because that would mean admitting to how he got them in the first place. He was trapped in his own web of arrogance. For once, he was the powerless one, not in me. I was on my second episode of a comfort show, curled up under a blanket, breathing freely in a way I hadn't in years. I blocked his number that night. Not out of anger, but because his voice no longer held any weight in my life. I was done. I had walked away from that job with nothing but a backpack, a resignation letter, and 2 years' worth of emotional scars, and somehow, with one edited PDF file, I got it all back. I wasn't there, but in my mind, I've replayed that scene 1,000 times, Frank and his wife, dressed in their finest, stepping out of their rideshare like royalty. He's probably holding the door open just a bit too late, still thinking he looks chivalrous. She's adjusting her hair, her silk gown catching the golden lights outside the venue. There's music playing faintly from inside. The murmur of excited guests. A red carpet rolled across the entryway, and there they are, walking up to the gate. He scrolls through his phone to find the tickets. Pulls them up like it's nothing. A confident nod. That same smirk he wore when he used to toss reports back at me and say, "Redo it." He flashes the QR code to the usher. The scanner beeps. Then stops. A pause, the usher tries again, another pause. "I'm sorry, sir. These aren't scanning." Frank blinks. Confused. "Try again," he says, sharper now. "They're digital. Sometimes the light messes with it." The usher tries again. Nothing. They check the internal ticket number, still nothing. "Do you have the confirmation email?" Frank's confidence is starting to shake. "No, I got these through someone. They were confirmed." "Look at the name, it's under." He stops. He doesn't know the name. Not fully. His wife looks over, eyes narrowing. "You don't have the confirmation email? What name did they use?" He fumbles. Mumbles something close to my partner's first name. "But it doesn't match anything on file." "I'm sorry," the usher says again, polite but firm. "These tickets are not valid." Frank's ears are turning red. His breathing changes. He's embarrassed, and worse, he's being seen. There are people behind him now. A line forming. He tries to demand a manager, but this isn't his construction site. This is a prestigious venue. With protocols. And rules. And staff trained to not respond to threats. They offer him a pamphlet. A smile. And a suggestion. There are sometimes resale tickets on third-party apps, but this show has been sold out for weeks. "Sorry, sir." His wife is humiliated. She's adjusting her dress, looking away. He's hissing now. Probably blaming me. Or the system. Or the staff. But none of it matters, because the doors are closing. The show is starting, and for the first time, Frank isn't on the list. I didn't need a front row seat to his meltdown. I didn't need to hear the yelling. Didn't need to watch him pace, argue, flail his arms, or scowl at his embarrassed wife. I could feel it all, without ever leaving my living room, because this revenge wasn't about humiliation. It was about freedom, and that's what I felt as I sat there on my couch, warm tea in hand, phone set to do not disturb, watching the rain tap softly against my window. It wasn't just satisfaction, it was liberation. For 2 years, Frank had held the reins. He decided how late I stayed. What I did on my weekends. When I could eat, breathe, even blink. He decided my worth. My hours. My identity until I decided to take that power back. Quietly. Strategically. Without raising my voice. He had screamed at me in front of coworkers, thrown things at me, humiliated me over typos and formatting issues. And I I edited one line of text. And made his world collapse, if only for a night, but it was never about ruining his weekend. Not really. It was about proving that I was never weak. I had just been contained. Compressed. Waiting, and when the moment came, I didn't explode. I didn't curse him out. I didn't trash his office or slash his tires. I simply handed him back the same carelessness, disrespect, and dismissal he had handed me, wrapped inside a perfectly edited ticket. A single moment of misdirection that reminded him even the quiet ones bite back. Looking back now, I don't regret a single second of it, because revenge doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be dramatic or destructive. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge is silence. A smile. A well-placed correction on a PDF file. It's the choice to walk away on your terms. To reclaim your time, your voice, your dignity, without ever stooping to their level. Frank taught me how to endure. But in the end, I taught him something far more valuable, that even the ones you think are beneath you are often the ones who hold the power to make you fall. He'll never see me again, but I promise you, he'll remember me. If you felt even a flicker of satisfaction hearing how this all played out, go ahead, hit that like button. Because some stories don't need explosions to be explosive. Sometimes, all it takes is a quiet act of brilliance. And letting karma do the rest. Subscribe to the channel if you love hearing real-life revenge stories, ones that don't just entertain, but empower. And drop a comment below. What's the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen or pulled off? I read them all, and believe me, the best ones just might show up in a future video. Until next time. Stay sharp. Stay strong. And never underestimate the quiet ones.